comments with the Yolo County District Attorney's Office in California. This happened in April of 2021. The dashboard is already being used by the Yolo District Attorney to inform and change policies in his jurisdiction. Thank you again, Dr. Escobar, for joining us today. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Kimmy. Good morning, everybody. And before we start, happy Juneteenth, very important celebration today and the whole weekend, hopefully. Kimmy said, my name is Gipsy Escobar. I'm currently the Director of Product Strategy at Measures for Justice. And I'm here to talk to you about how we're using data to drive change in the criminal justice system. Measures for Justice is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to collecting criminal justice data across the United States and making it public so that people can see how their local criminal justice systems are performing. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we're doing at MFJ, and then I would love to give you a demonstration of the Commons dashboard that we're now doing with prosecutors' offices and soon to come to a Florida county near you. The idea of data of Measures for Justice, we were founded in 2011 on the heels of a book that our executive director and founder published in, I believe it was 2008 and 2009, called Ordinary Injustice, where she basically traveled the country, sat in court, interviewed court actors, court clerks, prosecutors, victims, defendants, public defenders across the country. And she found that not surprising to anybody, I suppose, but back almost more than a decade ago, it was still just being kind of like uncovered that the media, we get the most egregious cases through the media, but that on a daily basis, there are things that are going in the criminal justice system that are hard to call justice. So in the conclusion of her book, she basically said, but these are just some examples of the stories that happen in across America in every court. But we really don't know the extent of the problem because we don't have data. So that kind of became the seed to founding this organization, Measures for Justice. And we started in 2011 with the idea of basically measuring local criminal justice performance at the county level. We chose the county level because that's where the majority of important criminal justice decisions are made. The prosecutors, courts, jails all work at the county level, even though law enforcement is much more localized. So we spent about 4 years developing a methodology that will help us standardize disparate data across jurisdictions, across multiple criminal justice agencies, across different statutory laws, so that we could create measures that could be used to do apples to apples comparisons across jurisdictions. So it's difficult to create benchmarks in criminal justice because let's say if you were to say what's the percentage of cases that should be dismissed, that's a difficult question and it's very contextualized. So without those benchmarks, the best thing we have in terms of assessing whether a local criminal justice system is working to protect public safety with fairness and with fiscal responsibility was to create a system of comparisons, though we don't do any rankings or things like that. So we created that methodology. We developed a data pipeline that helps us take any raw data. We take the data as it comes, as the courts or the prosecutors or jails produce it, and take it through this pipeline. And it sounds easy. It's a lot more complicated. But let's say that at the other end of the pipe, we come out with data that's standardizable and can be used for measurement. We just in 2020 achieved 20 states. So we have right now in our national data portal If you go to measuresforjustice.org, you can get access to our data portal. That has now data for over 1,200 counties across 20 states in the United States. So it has the number or kind of performance measures that each state might have may differ based on the data that were available at the time. But you can get a general idea of how states and counties within those states are performing across areas from, when the case review by prosecutors all the way down to sentencing, going by diversions and pretrial releases and things like that. And what this year we're working on developing or integrate, or not this year, we've been working on this for the last 2 years, but hopefully this year we get to launch it. A way of integrating policing into the measurement system. Policing, for many reasons, is a very different beast, if you will. The way in which you will count things varies. You look at incidents and calls for services, interactions, arrests. Whereas when you look at prosecutor and court data, you're looking at cases in a much more kind of like streamlined way. So we're still working on integrating policing into the system, which we hope to do this year. We've also been working on data standards and legislation. The idea is to improve the way in which criminal justice agencies across the United States collect data. When we started, there were no standards at all. Every agency within each state, within each county might do things differently. Even within the same county, you can have two different agencies, let's say the prosecutor and the court, define things differently. So that makes it very hard to assess how the system is performing if we're not talking the same language. So with this, we educated the Florida legislature and California legislatures to pass criminal justice data transparency legislation. The most ambitious one passed in Florida, where court clerks, prosecutors, jail administrators, conflict counsel, the Department of Corrections, and I think that's all, are mandated now to report a standard set of data elements that are uniformly defined across the state to the Department of Law Enforcement. And the Department of Law Enforcement is to make that data available publicly in their data portal. This legislation was incredibly ambitious and it had an aggressive timeline. And I always like to say that passing laws is easy, quote unquote. The devil is really in the implementation. So it has been the launch of that data in the FDLE's portal has been delayed by a couple of years, quite frankly. But it is a very complex process, and setting up all the infrastructure to make sure that the data is transmitted in a secure way and that it's not a garbage in, garbage out kind of process has been complex. But we're hoping that by the fall, FDLE will actually be publishing the data from the agencies at the case level. So that we think that's going to provide unparalleled transparency compared to any other state, because people, researchers, the media, anybody with interest in data in criminal justice will be able to access that data, download it, and do their own analysis. So from those experiences in Florida and California, we have done model legislation consultation. We have provided expertise to legislatures, both at the state and federal level, whenever a bill, criminal justice bill, included a data collection component. We've also, in our website, have a section that now evaluates the state of criminal justice data across the United States. This section looks at what are the public access laws around criminal justice data in each state, so that people have kind of like a quick to go guideline to see what are the hurdles in terms of getting criminal justice data from the different states, and what is the process. And we have also some information there in terms of bills that for data transparency that have either passed or that are each session being discussed, and also in terms of what data we have from each of those states. So if you want to get a 360 picture of what's going on in terms of criminal justice data across the United States, go to MFJ's measuresforjustice.org website. And we'd also worked with other organizations such as the National Center for State Courts and the Council for State Governments on developing data standards for the courts and for really all areas of criminal justice. And lastly, and this is the area where I'm going to focus more today, we also provide tools, services, and research. So basically, we are stimulating agencies, policymakers to use their own data to generate change. And also, as a nonprofit, our funders are pushing us for some revenue generation as well. So that's part of like the services that we are providing. The tool that I'm going to discuss today is called Commons, and I'm going to stop there because I'll get really more in depth with that in a second. But we've also created some partnerships with other organizations in the field. Now that we have collected a mountain of criminal justice data, particularly around the courts, we're going to start using that to do research and to connect the data more to policymaking. And we're also doing evaluation, consulting, and technical assistance. So let's talk a little bit, for the rest of the time, let's talk about Commons and what this tool is. The premise that we have, both from the data portal, the national data portal, and this more localized dashboards that we are working at first with prosecutors, but our goal is to work with all agencies, and down the line really have dashboards that are integrating the data across agencies, all agencies in a given county. But our premise is that when the public, the police, prosecutors, and the courts share and trust the same data, those data really become the common ground for reform. What we see right now is that each agency produces their own statistics, produces their own data, and they don't trust each other's data. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard, one side or the other say that they don't trust the other side's data, that their data is the right data. So getting into an agreement around the data is, in a way, the first step to have that fact-based dialogue towards reform. So, like I said, the common ground is in short supply. I think after the last couple of years, we've gone on the kind of like divisions that we've seen across all areas of society in our country. This is not a surprising or a groundbreaking statement to make, but people are really having a hard time finding common ground. So when you don't have common ground, you can have transparency, because whatever transparency you may have, like I said before, it might be conflicting between the different parts of the system. You're not going to have trust even within the system and towards the system. The community members clearly don't trust the system, and you can have accountability if you don't have that kind of information at your hands. So what we have been working on for the last 3 years is creating this model where we co-create a joint space for making criminal justice data transparent and have shared goals and make it public. So when we talk about co-creating, is because we're working with, in this particular case, with the prosecutor's offices, but we're including the community. For each office that we're working with, we are creating a community advisory board that is representative of the jurisdiction across all lines, and that is also representative of people's experiences with the system. So that they are really the foundation for developing the dashboard. Like, they will let us know, what are the main community concerns, what are the main community interests in terms of the data that they want to see out of their prosecutor's office, what is the best way for the DA's office to communicate with them. So Commons is a co-created online space for ongoing access to your community's criminal justice data. That's how we are branding it. And once again, going back to those 3 important items, Commons helps achieve accountability by tracking the performance of the system in general using one agency's data, and how cases are processed, and how practices might impact the lives of individuals. Transparency. As I will show you in a second, the dashboard shows how cases flow month to month through the office, so people can actually see what's going on. And by the way, this is, and you'll see in a second, this is not a place where you will go and look up as John Smith's case. It's not that. It's aggregated at the unit of time level, so you can look at things month to month, or quarterly, or yearly. And lastly, it's a place where we think we can build trust between the community and the prosecutor's office. The process itself is designed to build trust among between the two parties by engaging the community and ensuring that the dashboard offers answers to questions about things such as racial and class disparities. So how do we do this? First, we co-design with the local community, as I said before. They're involved from day one until after launch of the dashboard, and they become kind of like ambassadors after launch in terms of helping out, do outreach with other community members and advocacy organizations, so that they're aware and can use the data. We curate the data, and also in the process, we identify any data culture and data infrastructure issues that the agency may have. And in our pilot site with the DA's office in Yolo, California, they're actually started calling us their data therapists, because as we were discussing the challenges that we were encountering when we were processing the data, we were giving them recommendations back as to how to better record that information so that it can be more reliably used in future measurement. The design is very flexible, and it will offer customizable data visualization and sharing tools, as I'll show you in a second. Like, the sharing aspect of this is one of the most interesting pieces, because people will be there will be an easy way for people to show a visual, a specific measure that they filter in a specific way with their state, legislatures, their county legislatures, the local media, any policymaker that they think might find information useful as they're thinking in policymaking, or problems that have not been unearthed and need a policy solution. The dashboards measure local system performance, and again, it's not about measuring one single agency's or office performance. It's about using that agency's data to measure the performance of the system as a whole. You could, like I said before, you can compare to other jurisdictions through MFJ's national data portal. Again, in the absence of benchmarks, the best you have is comparing to your peers. One thing that in the case of prosecutors, they have to commit to do when they start a commons project is to identify and agree to a policy goal to track with the community group. So for instance, in the example of YOLO, the policy goal they're tracking is related to diversions, but in a different office, it might be something else. The idea is that we've created a repeatable, efficient process set to scale so that we can do many of these dashboards. And the pie in the sky, the dream really is to have dashboards that integrate data from multiple criminal justice agencies and social agencies in the same jurisdiction together. So how wonderful will it be to have a single spot where you could go and get data on early childhood education. You could get data about graduation rates. You could get data about, homelessness. You could get data about income, employment, in addition to the criminal justice data and mental health data, et cetera, et cetera. So like the dream is really to have a place, a hub, where all the data that informs criminal justice policies and practices can live, and experiences, quite frankly, to live in a single place. So without further ado, let me actually show you it. So this, oh, I see a question. 1 second. What have been the main barriers to getting a system like Common setup? On the flip side, what has surprised you in a good way? Carla, those are excellent questions. Barriers are myriad. Barriers include the quality of data that agencies might be collecting. That's potentially one of the biggest barriers, because even when you have the buy-in and when you have kind of like from the top, the elected official, really wanting this, I mean, I was gonna say probably, but I actually know this for a fact, that there have been decades or bad data practices in criminal justice agencies across the country that now, when the data are actually going to be used for this kind of transparency and accountability, need to be fixed in one way or another. And that takes resources from the office and from Measures for Justice and time. So that's been one of the biggest challenges. And what has surprised me in a good way? What has surprised me in a good way is the openness and willingness from these offices to actually do the work, to do the hard work. Like some of them had to pay overtime to their attorneys and non-attorney staff, so that they could go back several years and actually fix data in the system. So for instance, one thing that is pretty poorly collected across the board has to do with race and ethnicity. That's usually data that is coming directly from law enforcement. And in most jurisdictions across the country, that data usually just represents the perception of the arresting officer. So in YOLO, we had a high number of missing cases that had missing race information. So they went back and they, backfilled the information. And now they're actually working with the chiefs of police to improve the collection of race data, race and ethnicity data at the, entry point, at the, contact with law enforcement point. And they want to actually have a much more detailed breakdown of races and ethnicities that could help. So that has really surprised me. Has really been surprised me positively. Will you or another presenter be addressing, highlighting the resources that are currently available in Miami-Dade? I can offer a little information about Miami-Dade. I know that the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office is working on a dashboard themselves. I'm not sure when they are going to be launching it, but I know that they're doing the work right now, and we have provided them. It's not a Commons dashboard, but it's built in-house, and they will be launching it, I think, this year. And we've been giving them recommendations, and it's a very serious attempt to bring transparency to Miami-Dade as well. So you can expect something, I'm thinking probably by the end of summer or the fall that they will go live with this. Again, it's a different setup than Commons, but also with the goal of becoming transparent. And if you go to our national data portal at measuresforjustice.org, we have data for Florida there, including for Miami-Dade, on some performance measures. It's a little old at this point. We're in the process of updating it, but you can see that information there. Okay, let's see. So let me show you what you can do with Commons. And like I said, I'm not at liberty to say when or where yet, but there will be a Commons coming to a county near you in the near future. So one of the first things that we do is identify with the Community Advisory Board and the office a goal that they would like to track or that they should track over time. So in the case of Yolo County, California, which is our pilot county, the decision was to track a goal that they have to divert or to increase diversions to 10% of the felony caseload. So right now, we go back to a little before the program started, and we track month by month how this goal is going. We'll have a new release of data in July that will go, I think, into May or June, and we'll see how they're doing with that goal there. This section is my favorite section, quite frankly, is following how cases flow through the system from the point of entry. So from the point when they're referred through the office, not the system. So from the point when they're referred to the prosecutor's office, all the way down to disposition and sentencing. So what you can do here is you can look at the decisions made by the office on a monthly basis. So here for the referrals, you will be able to see the breakdown of the cases that they're receiving, whether felonies or misdemeanors, by offense type each month. If I change, right now the default is the last month available, which in this case is January of 2021. But if I change, say, to July 2020, then my numbers are gonna change in below as well. This section, we're looking at the decisions made by the prosecutor after they review cases. So we're looking at the percentage or the number of cases that were prosecuted or that were filed for prosecution that month, the number of cases that were rejected for prosecution that month, and then diversions that happened pre-filing, meaning that there were no files charged and the defendant was diverted. This section is under construction a little bit. Here we go deeper into diversions and look specifically what kind of program people were diverted to. In this section, we look at how quickly cases move through the system. So we're looking at, in between case milestones, how long on the average it takes to get there. So looking at in this case is the median time, because averages can be skewed by extreme cases. But is the median time, so like the middle of the distribution, or basically what it means is that 50% of cases went from offense to case referral in below 8 days, and 50% did so in more than 8 days. So from offense to case referral to charging to arraignment, and then arraignment to case closure. How cases end in terms of disposition. So you have all your potential dispositions here. You can see here we did a big breakdown of jury versus bench trial, but those trials are not really happening very frequently. So you can see it's mostly, through plea bargaining. And lastly, sentencing, looking at the sentences that were imposed on each month. And right now, again, because I selected July of 2020 up in the graph above, that's showing in the data for that specific month. We did a lot of work with the community to figure out the right language, to make sure that the information was digestible and comprehensible by community members. So there's lots of places here where we are defining technical terms, for instance, like what was a prosecutor? What does it mean that it was referred? What do we mean by a defendant or a citation, et cetera, et cetera. But what I'd like to show you, and this is the coolest part of this, is how you can actually store the data in much more detail. So if you click on any of those cards in the overview, it will send you to this much more detailed view of the data. And the default, it will show you the last 13 months, but you can change things here to look at data quarterly or annually, from 2016 on, or from whenever we have data from onward. And that kind of like takes a little bit of the noise away. So let's keep it as annual data for now. If one thing that I like to show, because it has also already led to policy or practice changes and policy changes is looking at cases rejected for prosecution. We can break down the information in multiple ways by defendant characteristics. So for instance, if we wanted to look at the rate of rejection across different racial groups, I'm going to turn on unknown. But you can see that, you know, for most years, except for 2020, 2020 is obviously an outlier year because of COVID, but for most years, Asian or Pacific Islander defendants had a higher rejection rate for prosecution than any other group. Whites compared to Blacks also have a higher rate overall, but here, like in 2018, the rates tend to, for whites, Black, and Hispanics tend to be very, very close together. So you'll be able to see that. And in addition to that, down here, you can look at racial disparity calculations. So that's basically comparing the rate for rejections for white defendants to the rate of rejections to, say, Black defendants. If you see this little symbol over one of the graph of the bars, that means that disparity is statistically significant. And you can compare any two groups together. So if you wanted to compare now white and Hispanics, you'll be able to do that. Or if you wanted to compare Black and Hispanics, you could also do that. So you can compare any two groups. You can also look at the information by other characteristics such as sex, age, whether the defendant is a county resident or not, offense characteristics such as offense type. So let's see, in terms of rejections, what offense type tends to have a higher rate of rejection, and violent offenses for the most part tend to have a higher rate of rejection. It's not surprising, I've seen this in other jurisdictions. Offense severity, then within, so if we look at specifically at violent offenses, where we saw a high rejection rate, we can then look at each specific type, and these are following the FBI Uniform Crime Report categories. So simple assault and forcible rape tend to have the higher rejection rates. But one thing that I wanted to show you here, because it has already led to policy changes, is looking at the rejection rate by arresting agency. And this can become a really interesting tool for prosecutors to work with their with the law enforcement agencies within their jurisdictions. So what you're seeing here is the percentage of cases that are rejected for prosecution that were referred by each police agency. When you look at this graph here, oh, I'm gonna, let me actually turn off the state agencies. What you can see here is that there are two departments, Woodland and Davis, that tend to have a higher rejection rate than the other departments. So Davis, again, 2020 is an aberration because of COVID, but Davis, generally speaking, in 2019, 2020, and the years before was kind of like tied with Woodland, had a higher rejection rate. And so what the DA's office is doing now is having the conversation with the chiefs for each police department and asking questions as to why are we rejecting your cases so much more often than we are rejecting the cases other departments bring in, looking into a question and say, like, are you not arresting the right people, or are you not bringing in good cases? Are you not like collecting enough evidence, or whatever it is? So this has become a tool for them to look into case rejections as well, and working with the prosecutors. Another interesting thing that has led to impact, and it led to impact within the first month of launching Commons, was diversions. So let's go back to, I'm just going to use the white comparison to people of color for simplicity's sake here. But they saw that they have a minor disparity in terms of people with diversions. But what they actually let me go here. What they saw is what they were getting in terms of referrals. They were getting disparities in the cases that they get. So they're getting a higher proportion of people of color being referred to the office across the board, across the whole county, than white people. And if we look quickly at the county information tab here, you can see the racial distribution of YOLO, where you have is almost 50% white, about 30% Hispanic, and only 2%, 2.4% Black. So those numbers clearly are showing a disproportionality there. So what they decided to do, what they decided to do was, and they just announced this policy change last week, was to change the eligibility criteria for people to be diverted. The eligibility criteria disqualified people who had a felony conviction within the last 3 years or a misdemeanor conviction within the last year. So they're doing away with that and keeping some exceptions like domestic violence and sexual assault, DUIs. The diversion programs also require the consent of the victim to put the defendant through the program. But what they're hoping now is that by removing these disqualifiers based on criminal history, they're going to be able to increase the people that they're diverting in like about 25%. So that's going to have a big impact in terms of collateral consequences, in terms of jail populations, and all the other social costs of having a criminal case. So we could also, I could slice and dice this data all day long here. I'll give you one last example, and then I'll open up for more questions. If we want to look at sentences, say, when I look, say, for instance, at state prison sentences, once again, we can do the same analysis by disparities, not surprising. I mean, this kind of goes up and down. Oh, that's monthly, so it's noisy. But let's go yearly. You see clearly, there is a disparity in more people of color having a higher rate of being sentenced to prison for felony cases compared to white people. But you can then even break that even more. So say that you wanted to focus specifically on, let's say, young men. You'll be able to select, these are basically children tried as adults. So let's select, through 35 years old and apply that. Then you're grabbed specifically to that group, and you see that the, at least in 2016 and 2017, the disparity was even larger for that subpopulation. So the kind of like corollary for this presentation is that what we are trying to do is to bring criminal justice or transparency to criminal justice through data, and data that is public and data that can be easily understood by the public, and pushing them for or empowering both communities and practitioners to use that data to push for or implement reforms. Like I said, in YOLO, just within a month of being live, they already did all those policy changes. Last thing I'll show you here, this is what I was saying before, that you could share so say like this view that we had, where we were looking at that specific group, kind of like emerging adults, young adults, in terms of sentences, and say that that's a very important thing that, let's say the Daily Democrat has been putting a series on that. You know, I can write them an email, say check out this statistics, match your series or something like that. You can provide here, you know, a note about why you find this interesting, provide your information, and then submit it. I'm not going to submit it because I don't want to spam them. But you can also share exactly what you're seeing with anybody in social media or just by sharing the link. And the great thing is that you don't have to tell them, okay, go to this website, click here, then filter by this. You'll be sharing exactly this visual as you see here. And you can also download the data. So here, you know, for this specific, you will download the data for this specific measure with those specific filters, but we're also bringing in the possibility or the option to download all the available data. It's all anonymized. It will all probably be at the year or month or quarter aggregation level. So there's no privacy concerns. But we did want to make it available so people could replicate the measurement or do their own analysis as they you know, continue to play with the data. So currently we are working with 4 additional jurisdictions, and there will be a 5th, which actually is in Florida next year. So we're hoping to bring commons to more places in America. And to definitely, I mean, the most rewarding part of the work has been to see how the communities have actually owned it. I remember there was a presentation where we had, before we launched YOLO, and one of the community members from the community advisory board got very passionate and she started saying, like, this is not the prosecutor's dashboard, this is not MFJ's dashboard, this is my dashboard. And we're like, yes, that's exactly we want these dashboards to be, to be owned by the community, driven by the community, so that we can have more of that fact-based dialogue. So I'll leave them, my contact information there. If you want to learn more about Commons, you can also go to the link below. And I'll leave the last few minutes for questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Escobar? And you can raise your hand. We can unmute your microphone. I guess the one big question is a lot of people here, they intersect with criminal justice and with all this data. How can groups here get involved in this process?
That's an excellent question. So actually, if we, let me go here for a second, there is a section of our website. So like, this is the measuresforjustice.org website. If you go to Commons here, you know, they're featuring this piece. Let me, oh, that's the data. If you go here, there, I believe there is a link to here, start a Commons. So you can request a survey for an agency to see how their data infrastructure and the data quality is at on the moment, or they can get in touch and contact us. We've had some people contact us through this button here, where they've, like, from the community, where they've also CC'd county officials to bring this to their attention. So if anybody, you know, wants to get involved, push your local agencies to have this level of transparency, you can, you know, you can contact us here, but also, you know, make sure that you CC your local officials that will ultimately will make the decision as to how to do, you know, whether to do this or not. But community pressure is really key for this transparency efforts to move forward.
So we have a question from Lauren Shore, who says, do you know of anyone who is using a similar process and tools to address economic disparities like racial, ethnic disproportionality in public schools discipline?
Excellent question. Very important topic. I think there are some efforts here and there, but they're not widespread across the country. I know California, and actually, I'm gonna botch this. Give me a second to remember the organization's name. There is an organization that is tracking a lot of things related to education nationwide. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. But if you allow me the time to find out the organization, I'll send it to Tim and make sure that Tim gets it to you. But there is an effort out there by a big organization that is collecting education specifically information and looking at disparities. There is also, I think, USA Facts. That's less localized, that's more at the state level, but they also look at, basically they use all kinds of government data to look at disparities across the board in terms of economic indicators, but also in voting rights, education, housing. So that's another really good resource, is USA Facts at the state level, but still fairly informative.
And she says, thank you. I will reach out to follow up. I'm so impressed with the data tools you presented. Incredible. And Lauren, we'll be talking about the Opportunity Atlas in the next block, and that's economic data at the community level.
Excellent. Yeah, the Tableau Foundation also has a couple of data hubs. Look up the racial equity data hub, and they're actually featuring all, a number, like multiple efforts that are out there to look at racial equity in different fields. So racial equity data hub by the Tableau Foundation is another great resource.
So I have two questions. My first question is, how can you ensure that your data is like the most accurate? And my second question is, like, what tools are you currently using now that MFJs plan to implement in the future?
That's a very good question. So we do not publish any data that we find to be unreliable. And quite frankly, the longest part of the commons process is the data processing. So we go through a really painstaking, and when I say painstaking, is like sometimes there are tears, process with the data where we assess it, we identify problems with it, we bring them out to the office to make sure that they know what are the challenges and make recommendations to fix those challenges. But if throughout the process those challenges or those problems are not solved, we just don't publish that piece of data. So I'll give you an example that happened with YOLO. Is that in their case management system, they were recording the sentence length information, but they're only recording it in narrative field where they were just putting lots of notes. So it was very hard to parse out sentence lengths out of that narrative field. It's just a text field that had no structure. So we were not able to measure sentence lengths, which is an important thing to measure and is really part of like our general measurement system. So we gave them recommendations as to how to better collect that information in a structured way. So instead of a narrative field, create these 4 fields, do it this way, et cetera, et cetera. And they're working right now on improving that. So we're hoping that this likely is just going to be prospective. So it's not, they're unlikely to go and fix that data for previous years. But we're hoping that as we move forward with more months and years of data with this particular office, we'll be able to show sentence lengths. So we also have a very rigorous data quality auditing process that goes through each data set goes through several rounds of internal audits, but then they're sent out to external experts. So usually it's a researcher who has worked with criminal justice data in the jurisdiction, and we have them review the data for the most part, looking at patterns for face validity. And oftentimes they have caught things that were not necessarily error or problems with the data itself, but errors on how we process the data. So that also allows us to catch those those fishy areas. And then lastly, it goes back to the office and community itself for them to review and see whether there is anything fishy. So there is always the cadency or the cadence that we want to have for publication is published every month or every other month. And with the idea that that lag will allow us to do quality control as well to make sure that bad data is not going out. And in terms of other tools, right now we're completely focused on Commons, the data portal, and doing some research with the data we already have collected from courts across the country, and doing some research specifically for agencies. So that's where we're going now.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Dr. Escobar? Well, I have one more question. So with your data, like how do you compare and contrast with other counties or countries?
Excellent question. Let's go. So the place you'll do that is at not necessarily inside of Commons, but Commons will send you to the data portal. So this is our national data portal. As you see, we have data now for 20 states. Let's go to Florida. And the first view shows you the data or the measures that are available across the state. So in the case of Florida, we have from information even before the case is filed in court. So including whether the case was a non-custodial promise to appear instead of a custodial arrest, rejections, dismissals, time to disposition, sentencing. And then if you want to select the counties, let's say select Miami-Dade, you'll be able to look at Miami-Dade compared to the rest of the state. But if we go to the actual measure, then you see Miami more in context of all counties for which the data was available and reliable in Florida. So here we're looking specifically at rejections for prosecution. So Miami-Dade has a high rejection rate, about more than a third of cases that came in during that time period were rejected for prosecution, is above the state average. And then you can compare to say, I don't know, I'm just gonna select the lower end here and maybe the middle, but you can do this much more intentionally by looking at selecting counties up here. So now I can compare Miami, and let's add the other outlier here, to maybe not the best comparisons, because I know Lee, Columbia, and Manatee are not as big as Miami. But if we wanted to, let's say, find at Palm Beach, gives you a more apples to apples comparison, and then you can see that Palm Beach and Miami have similar rates of rejections. So you can do that, and each measure has a related measure. So in this case, it's cases dismissed, and you'll keep that comparison there. Cases resulting in conviction. There are contextual measures related to, county information, and criminal justice resources were available, poverty indicators, and all kinds of footnotes and disclaimers. So that's where you can go do that, but you can also compare to another state. So this is right now in the portal, Florida is the only state that has cases rejected for prosecution, so I cannot select another state. And then lastly, there is this legal context here that if you were comparing to another state, tells you differences in law between the two states that might have an impact on the measure's outcome. And I think we're at time. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you all today. Thank you for your questions. They were really, really on point and very good. If you have additional questions, the top email here is my email address. Don't hesitate to email, and I'll be more than happy to engage in conversation with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Escobar. Appreciate your time. And I've been trying to get Measures for Justice back into our workshops since the very beginning when they joined us in Baltimore. And so it's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim and Kim. And have a good Juneteenth weekend and an excellent rest of the workshop.
Thank you.
That's great. So later this morning, we're going to have Dr. Amelia Kohm. I see that she's here already. She's going to be talking from her perspective at DataViz for nonprofits and best practices for data visualization and analysis. Before that, I want to give you just a quick primer on some of the tools, a few recommended tools that we have at PeaceTech Lab for collecting data and survey data, especially. And then after that, I'm going to show you just quickly the Opportunity Atlas, which looks at economic outcomes for Miami neighborhoods using IRS and census data. So let me. Oh, this is blocking my, my presenter view. All right, so you should be able to see this now. So for, why do nonprofits use surveys? One of them is to collect data, and you'll see this from Dr. Kohm later today. But one of the tools is Mentimeter, getting online questions and real-time results, short answers, measuring the pulse of the room, and fostering engagement and connection with the presenter. The dilemma that we've seen is there was a survey last year, 2,000 nonprofits were surveyed, and 88% said that gathering feedback was a major priority. Gathering feedback was a major priority in gathering impact and measuring that, but only 13% felt they were gathering feedback effectively. 2/3 of that group said the main barrier was a lack of staff capacity and resources. So why do nonprofits use surveys? Marketing and idea gathering, test messaging concepts, potential taglines and logos, doing event planning. Some of you have taken our Google Forms survey, so we can kind of understand who's in the room and the skill sets that we have and the needs that people have. Gathering donor feedback is another key area. Motivations, like why do people give money? Online fundraising, and just going down the line there. And what we've seen for organizations we've worked with, like key areas where people can improve that survey design. Number one is to define a clear, obtainable goal for your survey. And what does that look like? So say you want to understand why people are leaving your weekly newsletter at a high clip. Instead of a goal like I want to better understand our customers, maybe you should do something like I want to understand the factors leading to people that are unsubscribing from the newsletter. And once you've come up with a goal, you can use it as a reference to prioritize the questions around that. Another key area that we've seen is really keeping the personal questions to the end. Treat this survey like a conversation. So if you're meeting someone for the first time, you wouldn't start by asking somebody how old they were. Engage in the small talk first and gradually move on to those more personal topics. And if possible, you want to keep those early set of questions light and straightforward, easy to answer, and then move towards those more personal questions. Another one is don't let your survey get too long. In most cases, your respondents are doing you a favor by taking the survey, and you want to respect their time. So you'll be rewarded with a higher completion rate by keeping the questions shorter, and focus on using closed-ended questions as much as possible. So these are, pre-populated answer boxes, multiple choice check boxes, quantitative data for your analysis. You can add in those open-ended questions later. Those little bit longer where people give you 1 or 2 sentences on feedback. but kind of limit those to 1 or 2 questions if possible. Here's just a few more survey incentives. Don't ask leading questions, balanced questions, things like that. And for, just as important as putting together a useful survey, you want to ensure the privacy of respondents and protecting their personal information. So anonymize surveys when possible. Sometimes this is not possible, but ensure anonymity when you can. Using CAPTCHA questions, shut down bots for the most part. Enabling SSL, secure socket layers, to prevent against things like phishing scams, data breaches, and other threats. And once you have the data, for Google Drive, you've got permissions on the folders. In Dropbox, you've got password protected sites. You can show the results in aggregate and keep things protected on the back end. And if any of this is of interest at all, PeaceTech Lab can provide mentoring in this area. So what are the tools that might work best for your organization? It's really a crowded field. There are literally hundreds of platforms to choose from, and getting started is really a hard part for this. There are really no 100% right or wrong answers, and some will have features that work for you and some that won't. So kind of going through the list, just to give you a few examples, we've been using, PeaceTech Lab has been using Google Surveys, Google Forms to gather feedback from our participants from our organizations that are joining us, including a few of you here in Miami. Google Forms lets you create free surveys easily and quickly. Most of you have already used these before. Short answers, paragraphs, multiple selection, verification boxes, pull downs. There's a lot of things that we can do with that. This is some of the examples where we can understand who is in the room and what your needs are, as I mentioned before. There are some downsides. You need a Google account, obviously. You need internet. It's difficult to collect images, photos, pictures, signatures, and the design customization is really limited. And there are limitations on the text as well, but a lot of us don't run into that. Some of this is you can't plug it into Salesforce, Zoho, or Insightly or tools like that. So that's a drawback. A platform I would highly recommend, and this is one we've been telling organizations about, is especially if you're a nonprofit, it's called Question Pro, and they have a free service for nonprofits that never expires. They have survey templates designed for nonprofits, including those around event feedback, questionnaires, and donations. Some of the features include, obviously, free for life, it never expires, unlimited surveys, responses, no credit card is required. They have 25 question types built out for nonprofits. You can customize this, you can do logic branching, and you can do exports into things like Excel and CSV files. There is a professional version that is $85 a month that integrates with things like Salesforce. So if that's something you would be interested in, let us know. PeaceTech Lab has grants for things like this, and we'd be happy to help you. And here's just a few other ones that we've used in the past. One is called Kobo Toolbox. This is one that works really well with maps. Free to use, works online, offline, supports images and multimedia, secure socket layers, full encryption end to end, very customizable. And there are a ton of other applications out there that we've used before that we like, SurveyMonkey and Typeform, or a couple of the industry leaders. Some have, Typeform has a really beautiful interface. They have a freemium model for most of these, so you can test it out for free. And if you want to use the higher end model, they're generally about, this is showing about $25 a month, but usually about $75 a month is kind of the sweet spot for this. And again, if any of these are of interest or you want to try some of these, PeaceTech Lab has grants for that. And the last thing in this, I just wanted to tell you about Listen for Good, which is a free mentoring and software service designed to incorporate or to gather and incorporate feedback from your beneficiaries. So I'll send the link out to this, but it's put together by the Hewlett Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and the James Irvine Foundation. But it's a really powerful tool set. So with that, I want to jump in one more thing before I turn it over to Dr. Kohm, and that is going to be Opportunity Atlas. So I'm going to share my screen. And so Opportunity Atlas is a tool put together to measure the average outcomes of children who grow up in each neighborhood in America. They break it down by demographic subgroup, race, gender, parental income, and they focus on neighborhoods where the people grew up rather than where they live as adults. Because many studies have showed that the neighborhood in which a child grows up has substantial causal effects on his or her prospects of upward mobility, whereas places they lived as an adult have a smaller effect. So this is a platform where they pull together census data. They pull together federal income taxes all the way back to the 80s. And they put all this together to look at an analysis of over 20 million Americans born between 1978 and 1983. And let me show you just real quick what this looks like. So there is, it's a really easy interface. So if I was looking for Miami, I would just go to the top left box up there, type in Miami. It would zoom down on the neighborhood. And on this is looking at, right now, children's outcomes in adulthood. And this is looking at household income at the age of 35. So you can scroll around the different tracks in Miami and see how that breaks down. And on the left side, there are different outcomes that you can look at. So you can look at incarceration rates and break that down. So this is at the age of 35, this is how people, the incarceration rates in each place. But you can go back and forth. There are a lot of outcomes. There's teenage pregnancies, rents, all kind of different things that you can look at. And on the right panel, on the right side here, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but you can look at outcomes for different demographic groups. So you can break this down by race, ethnicity, gender, parental income. So it has low, medium, high. So low would be the 25th percentile, middle would be 50th percentile, and high would be 75th percentile. So you can start looking at this by different races in different places and see the outcomes at age 35. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's something, I'm not an expert in it. I think it's fascinating. We've got contacts there that said that they would work with us if anybody has any questions on this. But when you get these things together, or when you find the kind of some of the data that you want, in the bottom left side, there's download an image, there is download the data. You can upload your own data to go over top of this. And then you can even build stories out where they've got a comparison mapper where you can compare two counties, you can compare two tracks and look at the different outcomes in those places. So with that, I will just stop to see if you have any questions on that. And then if not, I will turn it over to Dr. Kohm.
Should I go ahead and share my screen, Tim?
Yeah, that'd be great. Welcome.
Great to see you.
You too.
Is that working okay?
Looks great. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Let me just make sure that I can see the chat. Okay, I am good. Okay, hello everyone. Great to be with you, sort of, today. We have a lot to cover and it's going to be both informative and fun. So fasten your seatbelt, sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. A little bit more about me. I love evidence, but I hate spreadsheets. Maybe you hate spreadsheets as well. I have more than 25 years experience studying, funding, and evaluating human services, primarily as a researcher at Chapin Hall, which is a child policy center at the University of Chicago. At Chapin Hall, I worked with a lot of organizations and their data all the time, and came to know the difficulties that many organizations face when trying to use data well. I felt there's got to be a better way for organizations without high-level data analysis skills in-house to extract meaning from their data, both quickly and painlessly, and really to put the data to work for them. And that's when I get interested in data visualization, or data viz for short. I got training in data visualization from the University of Washington. I started visualizing data for my colleagues at Chapin Hall, and also taking on my own clients on the side. I now work full-time for my organization, Data Viz for Nonprofits. I help nonprofits, consultants, and foundations to visualize data through my consulting business, doing a variety of things, which I'll share more with you at the end of the presentation. Okay, so now you know a bit about me. I would like to know a bit about you. To do this, I'm going to put a link in the chat and ask you to answer these 2 questions that you'll see once you follow the link. Let me put that in the chat right now. So click on that link and you'll see the quadrants chart that you're looking at on the screen. And then you answer those 2 questions, and how you learn your data personality. Of course, it's far from scientific, but it is a fun way to start thinking about where you sort of exist in relationship to data. So go ahead. And once you have determined your data personality, what happens is that orange circle will fall into one of the 4 quadrants, or on the line between 2 quadrants. And then you can scroll over your circle to learn more about your data personality. Once you've done all that,
Amelia, I think that went directly to me and not to the group.
Oh, so sorry.
Oh no, I did the same to you just a second ago. Sorry.
Yeah. That's fine. Good. I will send it to everyone. Oh, you know what? Oh, I see panelists and attendees. Here we go. Okay. So, okay, now you have the link. So click on it, answer the 2 questions, look to see where your orange circle falls, scroll over your orange circle, and you'll learn more about your data personality. I'll give you a minute to do that. And then once you're done, please put your name and your organization in the chat window. And if you feel comfortable, please share what your data personality is. It says the page no longer exists. Oh no. I was able to access it yesterday. Let me try to. Huh. Okay, I just accessed it, no problem. Is anyone else having that trouble? If anyone else is having trouble accessing it, please let me know. Okay, so sorry, Marnie, that you weren't able to access it. It sounds like other people are. So you'll just have to wonder what your data personality is. Maybe you can access it later. Again, once you know your data personality, please put your name, the organization you work with, and if you feel comfortable, your data personality in the chat window. Thanks, Marnie, for the alternate link. Okay, Carla is wonky. Nice to meet you, Carla. Alyssa from Dade Legal Aid is also wonky. Nice to meet you, Alyssa. Edgardo is wonky. We got a lot of wonky people here, as is Tim. I am myself wonky, as you might guess. It's good to know I have a very wonky audience, but every single category is fine. Even if you're averse, totally cool. Anna at Dade Legal Aid, right between cautious and wonky, cool. Let's wait for a few more. It's very good to get a sense of you all. Mira, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing people's names. Public defender, wonky as well. Marnie from Hope Public Interest Resource Center at Miami Law, also wonky. Okay, very wonky people. Okay, feel free to keep putting your names in if you haven't all done so, but I'm gonna, in the interest of time, just gonna move on. So here's the plan. Please remain muted, but if you have an urgent question, feel free to unmute and just blurt it out. Otherwise, put your questions in the chat window and we'll have certain points at which I'll stop and answer questions. We got a lot to cover today. We should get through item number 7 at least today, and if we have time, we'll do some bonus topics, which are item number 8. So we'll talk about the problems with and the potential of data. We'll talk about what is data viz and why is it important. What are the key elements of effective data visualizations? How should you choose the right chart for your data and your purpose? What are some data viz tools, particularly some free tools that are out there that you could use to visualize your data? Then we'll do, I'll do a demonstration so you can see how one tool, Tableau, works. Just kind of familiarize you with that tool. I'll close by offering you some resources to continue your data viz journey. And as I said, if we can, we'll get to some of those bonus topics. All right, so the problems with and the potential of data. So let's talk about why you don't use data, or more accurately, why don't you use data as much as you might? I have found there are 6 common reasons, and they're all quite understandable. So the first is data naivete or data aversion. So of course, nonprofit staff tend to have expertise in such issues as the environment, the arts, health, education, but not usually data analysis. Some have a downright data aversion. They admit or maybe proudly proclaim that they're not numbers people, although it doesn't sound like any of us fit into that category. But you probably work with people who fit into that category. All right, so another reason, of course, is time crunch. This is a reason why we don't do a lot of things that we would like to do. We're busy struggling to stay afloat, to submit the next proposal, to maintain programming, and of course, address the huge and varied needs of our clientele, cultivate new donors, and digging through data gets put on the back burner. Fear is another reason, right? So some understandably worry what their data will show. Nonprofit staff fear they won't be able to control the story, or that the data will be taken out of context, that they'll be compared to other organizations that aren't indeed comparable. They fear that funders will withdraw support based on data, no matter how much the funder might talk about continuous quality improvement and such. Dirty data is another reason we don't use data well. So some nonprofit staff have low-level staff entering data into management information systems or spreadsheets. Others have multiple staff members entering data, and each person is entering it a little bit differently. And the result can be what we call dirty data. So that's data that is inaccurate because it's not been entered in a consistent way. So for example, if a participant is entered twice into a database, perhaps he shows up once, his name is, and says his name is Michael Smith, he gets entered into your system as Michael Smith, drops out of your program, comes back 6 months later and gets re-entered as Michael B. Smith, then you got dirty data, right? And it's gonna be really hard to track his progress through your organization. Wrong data. So many nonprofits have data on their participants and their financials, but they often lack data to show impact. So a tutoring program may not have their participants' school grades or test scores. FERPA laws make it hard to get that data out of school districts. An employment program may not have data on former participants' wages over time, hard to track down those former participants. And indeed, some outcomes are just harder to quantify and require surveys of participants, as Tim was just talking about. Organizations often lack the time and funds to collect data from their participants. Number 6 is disconnected data. So rather than having a central management information system, smaller nonprofits may store their data on separate Excel or Google spreadsheets. So Michael Smith's demographics might be on one sheet and his attendance in various programs might be on another sheet. And this makes analysis of the relationship of, say, age to program participation really difficult. Okay, so we just talked about the reasons you don't use data well. But data is one of 2 superpowers that organizations have, which I'm going to talk about today. Most organizations have lots of data packed away in databases and spreadsheets that they're not putting to good use. Data is really the way we know what we're doing is worthwhile. You can think of it as a tool. We don't invest in other tools, for example, computers, and then just immediately store them away and rarely use them. But that's often what we do with data, right? We spend a lot of resources and bandwidth storing data without making good use of it. Even small organizations collect data on a lot of different things. Here's just a sample of the types of data that probably most organizations collect. Not only participation and program characteristics, and donations, but also things like website traffic, your audiences, your volunteers. Okay, so this is the point in the presentation where I give my little commercial or public service announcement, if you will, for data. And now I understand that you may feel that data is the last thing that needs a commercial. It's already way overhyped. We hear and talk about data all the time. We hear about evidence-based practices and data-driven solutions and key performance indicators. But in all the hype around data, I think we often lose sight of what its core importance is. So that's why I offer you this little commercial. So data is important because of how perception works. What we perceive is based not just on what we actually observe in the real world, the outside world, what we might call data, those observations are what we could call data, but also what we expect to observe. So this is how it works. The brain evaluates which of a variety of probable events are actually occurring, and what we perceive is based in part on what decision the brain makes. So sure, what we perceive is also based on those incoming signals from the outside world, but there are far more signals coming from within the brain. Those are those expectations that affect our perception. So a great example of this is a YouTube video that went viral several years ago. And I'm not going to show you the video because I bet a lot of you have seen it. If you're like me, you saw it as part of a presentation. The presenter gets up and says, okay, I'm about to show you this 2-minute video. And your job is to watch the video. You're going to see a bunch of people passing a basketball amongst themselves. Your job is to count how many times the basketball gets passed. So if you're like me, you dutifully watch the video, you counted how many passes. The presenter got back up, and rather than asking you how many times did the basketball get passed, the presenter says, show of hands, how many people saw a guy in a gorilla suit walk through the frame? If you're like me, you didn't see the guy in the gorilla suit at all. Presenter shows the video again. Sure enough, clear as day, there's someone in a gorilla suit walking amongst the people passing the basketball. And you didn't see the guy because you didn't expect to see him. So it's just really a great demonstration of the power of expectations to affect perception. So these inner brain signals can really distort our understanding of what a situation is. Thus, the incoming signals, or again, data, are quite important to either confirming or negating our expectations. But the key is you have to pay attention to data to make that happen. Progress in organizations, and indeed in all of human history, often starts with the concession that our expectations might be wrong and that data might have something to teach us. Of course, the scientific method you learned back in 7th grade primes us to focus on data rather than expectations. We must formulate a hypothesis and then use data from the outside world to see if the hypothesis holds up. So a bit of a disclaimer following that commercial. Data is indeed part of the answer, but it's definitely not the whole answer. Perhaps love is, who knows? But data is more about questions than it is about answers. It can show you what questions you should be asking and help you to refine those questions. It can also point you in the general right direction. But the thing is, you're never going to have perfect and comprehensive data. Data is never going to take you all the way to your solution or to your answer. So we need to understand that. Also, we should be wary, although not fearful, of data. We should always be asking questions of our data. Where did the data come from? Is the source likely to be biased? If drawn from a sample, is it representative of the larger population that the sample is designed to be representative of? Is there something missing from the data? Are there groups of people missing from the data? Are there time periods missing from the data? And if indeed that's true, why is the data missing? Are some survey respondents, for example, hard to reach, or do they lack trust in the data collector? All right, let me take a sip. Okay, so now we've talked about the problems with the potential of data. Let's talk about what data visualization is and why it's important. Okay, so now I want to talk about the second superpower. I talked about the first one, which is data. And the second one is your visual acuity. So let's test these visual superpowers. Which image do you comprehend first? The Mona Lisa or the spreadsheet? Okay, please do not put your answer in the chat window, because I'm going to just take a wild guess that you understand the Mona Lisa first. And that's because our visual system has evolved over millions of years to process images essentially in parallel. So what do I mean by that? What does it mean to process something in parallel? It means we don't read the Mona Lisa from left to right and from top to bottom. We take it all in together and understand almost instantly that this is a picture of a woman in front of a landscape, sporting a dark dress and, of course, an inscrutable smile. Words and numbers, which only appeared within the last few thousand years, require us to scan individual characters, recognize them, and piece them together into words or values, sentences, and equations. And while all types of sensory signals barrage the brain is especially geared for visual signals and uses half of its volume for visual analysis. And that's because for a long time during human history, survival depended on detecting danger, such as predators in the tall grass at a distance, using our visual systems. So when we use visual cues like length, color, and size, what we're doing is we're transferring much of the work that is needed to decode data from the slower conscious, energy intensive parts of the brain that deal with words and numbers to the faster parts of the brain that require less energy and result in more efficient cognition, because this capacity has developed over millions of years rather than just a few thousand years when we've had words and numbers. Data visualizations such as charts, graphs, and maps use these visual cues to communicate data, and thus greatly speeds up our processing of data, and so in part addresses that time crunch I talked about. Data viz is also a quick way to assess how dirty, disconnected, or irrelevant our data is. If the picture doesn't look right or complete, then we need to do something to improve our data. Maybe that actually means collecting fewer data points, but doing so more accurately. So now let's test out your visual processing superpowers. Very quickly, look at this array of numbers and let me know how many 9s there are. I'm going to give you 2 more seconds, because when I show you the exact same array with color coding, it's much easier. Again, we can process colors, a visual cue very, very fast. Okay, here's another test. Quickly try to answer the 3 questions you see here using the very simple spreadsheet above. What were foundation or corporate grants consistently higher? And what were the trends for each of the 2 types of grants? Again, through 2 more seconds, because when I show you the exact same data in a simple graph, it's so much easier to answer these questions. We can see that corporate grants were consistently higher over time. But even more so, we can see foundation grants remained relatively flat, with one glaring exception, that sharp increase in May. And we can also see something that would be particularly hard to see just looking at the numbers, which is that corporate grants exhibited a cyclical pattern, sort of an up, up, down pattern that repeated itself on a quarterly basis. So always reaching the peak in the last month of the quarter and then declining dramatically in the first month of the next quarter. Okay, so not only is data displayed visually easier to process, it actually appears to have more impact. A June 2018 Washington Post article described a series of experiments in which data displayed in charts significantly reduced the misperception of subjects in the study who were both liberal and conservative on important political issues. So this chart shows the results of just one of those experiments. In this experiment, Republican respondents are asked whether they believe that average global temperatures were increasing, decreasing, or staying the same over the past 30 years. And the respondents were divided into 3 groups. So there was a control group represented by the orange bars on this chart that received no information before answering the question. They were just asked what's going on with global temperatures in the past 30 years. Another group, represented by the gray bars, were given a textual summary of the scientific consensus of global temperatures. So they were given words to help them to better understand what's going on with global temperatures. And then the third group, represented by the blue bars, got, you guessed it, a chart showing temperature change since 1940 as measured by 4 climate institutions. And as you can see, the people who saw the chart, again, those blue bar people, were the least likely to draw the wrong conclusion. And strangely enough, the textual information actually exacerbated the perception problem for Republicans who strongly identified with the GOP. So the results were completely the same on the Democrat liberal side. They presented charts on issues that they were likely to get wrong, and it was they were presented questions that they were likely to get wrong, and it was the charts rather than the textual summary that really helped to correct their misperceptions. All right, So here are some challenges most organizations face. Of course, showing need for your services to current and prospective donors and funders, showing the impact of what you do, distinguishing your services from that of other organizations, and of course, always evaluating your progress over time and showing that progress to other stakeholders. Now let's consider how to visualize data to address each one of these needs. Okay, one way organizations use data is to make the case for the need for their services. And here's an example from over 200 years ago. So in the 1800s, Florence Nightingale and a statistician named William Farr analyzed army mortality rates during the Crimean War in England. They discovered that most of the soldiers hadn't died in combat, but rather by preventable diseases caused by poor hygiene. So Nightingale decided to make her case with pictures rather than tables of numbers or prose. In Florence Nightingale's word, quote, to effect through the eyes what we failed to convey to the public through their word-proof ears, unquote. So her invention was the polar area chart. That's what you're looking at now. And as you can see, it's sort of a variant of a pie chart. Each slice of the pie shows deaths for 1 month of the war, growing larger if deaths increase, and color-coded to show the cause of death. So the blue portions show the deaths due to preventable causes, the red portions show deaths due to wounds in battle, and the black portion showed deaths due to other causes. The Queen and Parliament could see right at a glance that hygiene was really important, and they set up a sanitary commission, and conditions improved, and indeed death rates fell. And Florence Nightingale became one of the first people to successfully use data visualization for persuasion and to influence public policy. There's lots of ways to show the need for your services. You can show it through an array of icons like this. This type of chart also uses color, and it may make more intuitive sense than a bar chart because bars can be quite abstract. This really hits it home that we're talking about actual people here. It also makes use of the number 100. A lot of people aren't so good at percentages, but they can kind of picture 100 people. So rather than saying 6%, saying 6 out of 100 and then showing 100 people. This is called a quadrants chart, similar to what the chart we use to determine our data personality. A quadrants chart shows the relationship between two key measures and can be another great way to show exactly where a need is. So I created this chart for a client of mine who was working with a number of school districts to implement what is called deeper learning strategies. The first thing they did was survey principals and teachers at these various schools involved in the project and ask them questions to ascertain how important each of the deeper learning strategies was to them already, even before the project began, and how often they already put these strategies into practice. This chart shows the overall result for all principals and teachers who completed the survey. Each dot represents one of those deeper learning strategies, and each dot is positioned to show the average importance assigned to the strategy and the average frequency of practice of that strategy. And really, you could see the consultants could see at a glance that although the teachers and principals already felt that the strategies were quite important, they were putting them into practice less than 50% of the time, with the exception of direct instruction. So they could see the need was really in addressing the obstacles that were preventing these educators from doing what they already believed was important. Another way to show need is to show viewers the type of data that they're most interested in, and that's data about themselves. So this is a cool way to what we call putting the viewer in the viz. This is an interactive visualization that I created. I'm showing you just a static image of it. And what it does is it asks the viewer to guess the answer to this question. So in this case, what percent of Black non-Hispanic children experienced poverty in 2019? You can see there's a slider bar and they can enter in their guess. And then they scroll over those words at the bottom. How'd you do? Hover your mouse here to see. And when they do, they just get this simple chart that shows what they guessed, what the actual data show, and what other people guess. So they can see kind of how close to or far off the mark they are, and how close to and far off the mark other people were. People love comparing themselves to others. So it's a great way to engage people in the need by sort of putting them in the data, and can be much more engaging than, you know, a list of stats, which can kind of make people numb. Okay, efficacy is another thing that we often want to show with our data, and nothing's more effective than the bar chart. It may seem tired, but we all know how to read bar charts already. So the cognitive load is really low. You know, sometimes in those really beautiful, sexy charts, we're really asking people to do two things. One is to figure out how to read the chart, and then to actually read the chart. And that can be too tall of an order. And bar charts don't require that. They're really, really easy to interpret and extract meaning from. So we can see right away that the goal was met in April or almost in March, and then exceeded in April. This type of chart, a line chart, makes an even stronger point by allowing a comparison of the trajectory of one group that got an intervention to another group that didn't. Really makes a very strong case for efficacy. Another way, this chart is another way of showing efficacy. This viz uses a number of techniques. The type of chart is called a stacked area chart. It also uses a technique called small multiples, when you place a number of small charts side by side to allow for easy comparison. It also used that 100-person trick rather than using percentages. And the notations, of course, are also helpful. We can see that poverty and child mortality have decreased dramatically over the past 200 years, and that basic education, literacy, democracy, and vaccination have all dramatically increased during the same time period. I don't even know what this kind of chart is, but I think it's quite effective in showing uniqueness. It shows a comparison of female students who identified as female and male, and what advanced placement or AP tests they took. It effectively shows where there is similarity and where the two groups diverge. So if you read it from sort of bottom to top, you can see there was equal numbers in both groups who took Latin and statistics and US government tests. But as you work your way up the chart, you can see there were way more students who identified as female who took French language and art design and drawing. Here's another simple way of showing uniqueness. This kind of viz is called a tree map. Don't ask me why, it doesn't look anything like a tree. It compares one organization to others using shape and color to show the number of clients served. And we can see really easily that Youth Together served more clients than all the other organizations combined. Okay, let's talk about evaluation and planning. Maybe a lot of you have heard of logic models. You may use logic models when you're planning a new program or intervention. And in my experience, logic models get a lot of play in proposals, but after that, they often collect dust. So logic models, if you're not familiar with them, are just simple flow charts showing sort of the inputs and intermediate outputs and final outcomes that a program is supposed to deliver. It's sort of how a program is supposed to work. It's a roadmap. And what I'm showing you here is called a living logic model, because I wondered if logic models could be much more useful if they were plugged into real-time data. So that's what I did here. And what this logic model is doing is it's using color shades to show progress on the logic model itself. So darker colors show where there's been more progress, lighter colors show where there's been less progress. And it's actually, you're looking at a static image, but it's actually an interactive visualization. So when you click on any measure, you get more information in the bar chart below, sort of disaggregated information on individual students in this tutoring program. You can also scroll over components to learn about different aspects of the program. So, and these can include images and web links. So it's a great way of explaining your program and the theory behind it to outside stakeholders as well. Okay, so let's go on to our third topic is what are some key elements of effective visualizations? I'm going to offer you today 10 suggestions. They're certainly not commandments, but in my opinion, if you do these 10 things, you're almost guaranteed to turn a good visualization into a great one. All right. This one maybe should go without saying, but it's so important that I'm going to say it. Clean data first. So before you visualize your data, look for missing data, duplicated data, formatting issues with your data. Everything rides on the quality of your data, so don't skip this step. There are a lot of great tools out there that can help you clean up your data. There's data validation features and things like Excel and Google Sheets. If you use Tableau, there's a great tool called Tableau Prep. And there's some free tools online. For example, OpenRefine that helps with what's called data transformation, which includes cleaning up data. Suggestion number 2, encode thoughtfully. Okay, so what do I mean by encode? So as I said before, data in raw form is usually words and numbers. So the coding is what visual formats you use to sort of transfer the data to a visual view of the data. And you have lots of choices, right? There's color, there's size, there's position. Cleveland and McGill and some others have studied what types of encodings people are able to decode most accurately and rank them in the following list. So you can see that position along a common scale allows us to make pretty accurate comparisons. On the other end of the spectrum, we can only make more generic comparisons when we're looking at things like color hue and color intensity. So if I showed you a bar, 2 bars, I can pretty confidently say that this bar is about twice as long as that bar. But if you showed me 2 shades of green, I'd be hard pressed to say one is twice as dark as the other, because we're just not as good at color intensity as we are at position along a common scale. All right, so pies, of course, are delicious, but often inscrutable when applied to data. So look at this image. Both of these charts are showing the exact same data, and we can confidently proclaim that the E bar is the tallest on the bar chart, but we'd be hard pressed to pick out which pie slice is largest. For me, it's, E, C, and D look pretty similar, and that's because we don't do so well with angles. So when comparing the quantities of several things, bar charts are almost always better than pie charts. There is one exception, and that's when you want to compare a part to a whole. So if you're just comparing one little slice to the whole pie, that can work quite effectively. But once you get beyond 2 or maybe 3 slices of pie, skip the pie chart and use a bar chart instead, or some other type of chart. All right, Suggestion number 3 is to highlight what's important. Once you've visualized your data, the story can still remain hidden, particularly to those unfamiliar with the data. And that's when it's important to call out certain data points with color and annotations. So drawing your attention to the C bar, I want you to compare that to the other bars in the chart. Here's some more examples. This is data from the Center for Disease Control on chronic illness, which shows an example of highlighting what's important. So this is called a parallel coordinates graph. It shows the level or amount of something across several dimensions. In this case, it's showing the percent of adults with chronic illnesses across the 50 states. So each line represents a state in the United States. And the notations in color draw attention to how low residents of Hawaii are in relation to other states on rates of depression. Hawaii is higher than other states in other chronic illnesses, but it's the lowest in terms of depression. And I'm just calling out the point for Oregon so you can really make the comparison between those 2 points. So it makes this visualization more effective. This is actually an interactive visualization too, so you can choose your state and only that state gets highlighted and you can compare it to the rest of the states, which are grayed out. Okay, number 4 is to show order. So ordered data should be shown in a way that our perceptual system intrinsically senses as ordered. Conversely, unordered data should not be shown in a way that implies an ordering that doesn't exist. So again, the charts on the top show the exact same data as the charts in the bottom. What you're looking at is health center data and the percentage of health visits that included depression screening across different care teams in family medicine, pediatrics, and women's health. This is for a health organization that was one of my clients. The bar charts on the top are not ordered. So you have to sort of do it mentally in your head to figure out, which teams did the best, which teams did the worst. So much easier when you show the order in that descending order in the charts at the bottom. We can see which care teams reached the goals set and which ones fell just below and which were way below much more easily. Okay, number 5 is to clarify rather than confuse with color. So don't use the same color saturation for different magnitudes of the same variable. Certainly don't use the same color hue for 2 different variables or data fields in side-by-side charts. So use color in a consistent way. Don't use too many color encodings on one dashboard or one page. And bright, fully saturated color is sort of like yelling. You don't want to yell all the time. People will think you're crazy and stop listening to you. So moderate your color as you might moderate your voice. Only yell when you have a really important point to make. And then provide all the other information in softer, less saturated colors to provide a contrast. Okay, let's talk about how this works. Okay, so this is the worst data dashboard known to humans. It kind of breaks all the color rules, right? So it's using the same colors in side-by-side charts to mean different things in different charts. It's using lots of bright, fully saturated colors. It's using way too many colors. It really just gives you a headache to look at it. And it certainly doesn't make it easy to extract meaning. If these 2 color arrays look the same to any of you, it might mean that you have red-green color blindness. Indeed, 7 to 10% of men are red-green colorblind. The prevalence is much lower in women because it's on the X chromosome, and the chances of having it on both your X chromosomes is really low. So it's something to keep in mind when visualizing data. Since a significant portion of the population have trouble distinguishing red and green, you shouldn't be putting them next to each other on charts. These maps show that CDC chronic illness data, and it uses a color strategy called a diverging color palette to emphasize contrast. So the blue shades show states with high ranks on 2 health indexes. And the orange shades show the states with low ranks on those same health indexes. And then the gray states were somewhere in between. So it's a really effective way of showing contrast. And we can, for example, pick out corridors of poor health, for example, in the Southeast, and corridors of better health according to the data. Number 6 is to delete the unnecessary. So if you've read anything by Edward Tufte, who's sort of the grandfather of modern data visualization, you know about what he calls the data to ink ratio, which should be as close to 1 as possible. And it's really a good thing to keep in mind. Eliminating non-data ink, or perhaps more accurately these days, non-data pixels, helps to make a visualization look more clean and to focus attention on the key data points by eliminating distracting visual elements that aren't necessary in communicating the data. So let's take a look again. Top and bottom chart show the exact same data. But on the one on the bottom, I've removed grid lines, I've removed data labels, and I've even removed the color legend and just directly labeled the trend lines. There are fewer distractions, which allow the viewer to compare the trends of the 2 groups more easily. 7 comes from a data visualizer named Tamara Munzer at the University of British Columbia, and it's no unjustified 3D. So we've all seen those kind of cool looking 3D charts on Excel and other similar applications. But the problem with using those types of 3D charts is that it leads to distortions that make it difficult sometimes to understand the data accurately. So let's look at some examples. Again, 2 pie charts showing the exact same data, but the one on the right uses a technique called foreshortening, which is a drawing technique in which you reduce or distort to convey the illusion of 3 dimensions in space on a 2-dimensional surface. So parts that are supposed to be perceived as closer in space are made larger. So see that red slice of the pie. Parts that are supposed to be perceived as farther away are made smaller. So the green and blue slices are made smaller. And as you can see, the angles represented on the 2D chart on the left are distorted in the 3D chart on the right. So if you really want people to understand that these are 3 equal pie slices, you would go with the 2D chart on the left. To create the illusion of 3 dimensions, another technique is to obscure some objects with others to make it appear that some objects are in front of other objects in space. But of course, this is a problem for accurate assessment in data visualization as well. In the top chart, the green bars are barely visible. So rather than have that 3rd axis, you can just use color, which the chart on the top and bottom are already using to distinguish the A, B, and C groups. And it's much easier to see, for example, in October, that the A group or the blue group was higher than the green group, but really hard to make that assessment with the 3D chart. Okay, 8 also comes from Tamara Munzer, and it's eyes beat memory. And that simply means that it's easier to compare 2 charts by placing them side by side than having to hold one in memory while you're looking at the other. So this is the power of that small multiples technique. This is a small multiples display by Doug McCune, who actually has a wonderful blog that you should check out. Small multiples charts address the power of eyes over memory. The small charts are all laid out together to make it easy to scan your eye across them. What you're looking at here is crime data. So each small chart shows a different crime, and the yellow bars on top show daytime crimes, and the blue bars on bottom show evening crimes. So if we kind of look across them, we can see that certain types of crimes are much more prevalent during the daytime, such as suicide and trespassing, but drunkenness and driving under the influence are much more common as evening crimes. Okay, when showing a series of visualizations, we should always start with the most general and then zoom in. So I did a series of 3 visualizations, 2 of which you've already seen using that CDC data, that chronic illness data. So the maps, of course, give you a general sense of where there are health concerns according to the data set, such as that corridor of poor health in the Southeast. The parallel coordinates chart helps to compare different states on specific illnesses and conditions. And then there was a last highly interactive page, which I haven't shown you, which allows the viewer to dig deeper into trends and possible predictors of good and poor health. Okay, so I will end my list of 10 by suggesting that visualizing data isn't always the way to go. So there are at least 2 cases where I would recommend that you not visualize your data and just simply present a table. One is that you already have an engaged but highly diverse audience. They're diverse in their interests. So these are folks who are highly motivated to access certain data and won't be annoyed by having to find the data that they're interested in on a table. But again, they're diverse in their interests. So different columns in this table are going to be of interest to different people. Tables use paper or screen real estate really efficiently. You can fit a lot of rows and columns in a small space, allowing users with different interests to find the data in a single table. Also, let's say you have many units of measure. So for example, you want to show the height, weight, location, and satisfaction level of 100 participants in a healthy eating program. This data involves 4 units of measure. We got inches, pounds, latitude, longitude, and survey ratings. Such complexity is difficult to represent in a single visualization because you have to come up with different encodings for each one of those measures. And that many different encodings on a chart can be pretty confusing. So that might be a case in which you might want to just put the data in a table. Okay, how to choose a chart for your data and your purpose. So I'm going to show you some good resources to use in choosing a chart. These are in the handout that I believe Tim has shared with you or will be sharing with you. Comes along with the workshop. The data visualization catalog is a great place to look up various types of charts and what they're good for. It's just simply sort of an encyclopedia of charts, and it's free and it's online. I also highly recommend Andrew Abella's simple decision tree called Chart Suggestions, a thought starter. You can find it online, but again, it's going to be in the resources that come with the workshop. It's based on Gene Zelazny's classic work called Saying It with Charts. And it's really pretty simple and straightforward. You start in the middle with the question, what do you want to show? And then it provides 4 answers. Do you want to show a comparison, a distribution, a composition, or a relationship? Once you answer that, it asks you a few more questions about your data and helps you arrive at a simple type of chart that will serve your purpose. This one's from Flowing Data, which is also a great data viz blog, and focuses on the type of data you have and then recommends a chart type. So there are 4 main types of data. There's categorical data, in which you have 2 or more categories, but there's no intrinsic order to the categories. So for example, a real estate agent could classify the types of property into distinct categories, such as houses, condos, co-ops, and bungalows. There's ordered data, or sometimes called ordinal data. is data that has 2 or more categories, just like categorical data, but there is an intrinsic ordering to it. So if someone asks someone if they liked the policies of the Democratic Party, they could answer not very much, they're okay, yes, a lot. Then you have an ordinal variable, because you have 3 categories and you can rank them from most positive to least positive. However, we can't place a value on them. We can't say the response they're okay is twice as positive as not very much. That kind of value data field is called a continuous data field. And that's data that can be measured along a continuum and have a numerical value. So for example, the difference between $30 and $40 is the same as the difference between $40 and $50. So those are the different kinds of data that you're going to have. And once you know what kind of data you have, this chart will help you figure out a good chart to use to visualize it. This one comes from Stephanie Evergreen, who's a data viz guru and is focused on common purposes you might have for visualizing, such as showing survey responses or showing change over time. Indeed, there are a lot of other decision trees out there. These are just some of my favorites. Some of them are actually interactive. So just know that there's tools out there to help you decide. Okay, let's talk about some of those data visualization tools. There are 2 primary tool types. So there are spreadsheets, of course, like Excel and Google Sheets. And there are programs specifically designed for data viz, like Tableau. We're going to just use Excel and Tableau as stand-ins for those 2 broad types of tools. Spreadsheet tools are electronic worksheets, of course, that display data in tabular form, so a table with columns and rows. Each data point is stored in cells and can be manipulated by manually setting formulas. And then graphs or charts can be created afterward to highlight a particular insight. But you usually have to have an idea of what you want to show before building the chart. Data visualization tools like Tableau typically connect to third-party tools to sort of pull the data in, and they have user-friendly functionality like drag and drop features, drop-down menus, so users can easily build charts and explore data freely, but you don't need to know sort of what you want to show at the outset. It really provides a tool for exploring your data. It allows you to see correlations and trends, and then dig down to understand what causes those correlations and trends by filtering the data by different subgroups. They also allow you to make the visualization an interactive experience for the viewer, which can also be done in Excel, but it tends to be more cumbersome. Tableau can be connected to live data, and so it automatically updates, the charts automatically updates as the data changes, whereas this process can be more cumbersome in Excel and programs like it. I promised you some free data visual tools. There are a bunch out there. So probably the best known are the 2 at the top, Tableau and Power BI. As you may know, they're both proprietary tools too. So you would have, you can pay for Tableau and Power BI through subscriptions, but they both provide free versions. I'm going to talk about Tableau Public, the free version of Tableau, more in depth in a moment, but you should know that they're out there along with a bunch of other tools that I have listed here. For a really comprehensive catalog of data visual tools, both free and otherwise, you can check out this online catalog, which is just a very broad array of tools. Okay, I gotta take a drink. Let's see if we have any questions. It doesn't look like we have any questions yet. Thanks for sharing those resources, Tim.
Yeah, I haven't been asking people to put their questions in, but if anybody has any questions, let us know. You can raise your hand. You can type them in the chat window. We can call on you and unmute your audio. And Amelia, while you get a drink, I just wanted to mention to everybody that we're going to have a free dashboard, data dashboard training session with Tableau and with Salesforce on July 16th. So we're going to have a session. It'll be at least an hour, hour and a half, with organizations going really in depth on how to build data dashboards for your organization. And we'll send around information on how to set up or how to join us for that.
Excellent. So Tim, also, should we provide people with a few minutes if they need to get up and get something to drink, or since I've been talking for a while?
Oh, I know. I feel the same, but not that you're talking too much. That I you know, it's a long haul. It's a marathon for people. So yeah. Take a drink and take a quick bio break, and then we'll hit our last session here.
Okay, good. Just let me know when you want me to start. I'm gonna
Sure.
change my slide in the meantime.
And I just want to put a reminder that next week we're going to be focused on media and social media. And we've got Ashley Reed, formerly a Hootsuite, who'll be talking. She's got a great session on social media for activists. We've got Sanjeev Chatterjee from the University of Miami, who's one of the world's media experts. And he's going to be talking about the power of storytelling for social justice. And finally, we're going to have a group called, some of you already know, Code for South Florida. They're working on civic tech, and they're going to be talking about an app they have called Badge Watch to monitor police. And also there's going to be a joint presentation with Community Justice Project to talk about their community. It's called an eviction protection app that they put together. So kind of all the data that's come together, how that process worked, and kind of lessons learned. So that'll be coming up next week. So we look forward to welcoming you back for that. So Amelia, do you give everybody another minute and then jump back in?
Sure.
I was just watching, we had convoys going through. We've got I'm out in Hampton, Virginia, close to this place called Fort Monroe, it was the first place where enslaved Africans arrived in 1619. And it was also the first place they were given their freedom during the Civil War. So it's kind of this really interesting history here. And we had the governor of Virginia here. And I was told that we had the president coming. I didn't know he was back yet from Europe, but he was coming to give remarks as well.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So before we get going, did anybody have any questions for Amelia? Okay, I guess that means everything was crystal clear.
That's true. Do you want me to start again?
Sure, yeah, feel free to jump back in.
Okay. So now we're going to take what we've learned so far and apply it to a familiar challenge using the type of data you probably already have on hand. So the challenge is showing funders, donors, board members, clients, and other stakeholders the reach of your organization. And the data is what I call pantry staple data. So that's data that most organizations already have on hand. In this case, it's demographic data. And the tool we're going to use is Tableau Public, which I promised to share with you. So you can subscribe to Tableau on a monthly or annual basis, but you can also use the free version called Tableau Public. That's what we're going to use today. So Tableau Public has a lot of the same features as the paid version. The primary differences are that there are fewer data connection options with Tableau Public. You definitely can connect to Excel and Google Sheets, but other databases that you might want to connect to, such as Salesforce, that's not possible with Tableau Public, where you would need to subscribe to the paid version for that. So you also, the other big difference is you can't save what you create with Tableau Public to your desktop or to your own server. You have to save it to the Tableau Public server. So it's not good for sensitive data, but you should know that you can hide what you create from anyone who doesn't have the URL for it. So again, it's not going to be good for like education or health data, certainly not good for any kind of participant data where you have identifying information such as addresses or phone numbers or social security numbers. But a lot of my clients use Tableau Public. They just give me a de-identified data set, and we hide it so no one can find it by Googling for it, and only people with the URL can access it. So I'm happy to talk more about Tableau if you have questions later. It sounds like you also have a great program coming up where you can learn about Tableau more in depth. Hopefully this will be, this demonstration I'm about to do will give you a taste of it. And if you want to learn more, maybe attend that next session. Okay, so we have limited time today. So here's the strategy that I'm suggesting. Don't take notes or try to follow along in Tableau. Just watch, soak it in as best you can. Then later you can try it on your own. I'm providing detailed instructions with this webinar, including how to download Tableau Public. I think Tim also just put that in the chat. How to download it to your own computer. And I'm also providing the data file that I'm using in the demonstration. So you can certainly try this on your own later if you would like. But before we begin the demo, I just want to familiarize you with the Tableau worksheet view and its key features. So this is the worksheet view, and it's what you're going to be looking at most of the time in Tableau. It's where you build a single visualization. So just one chart, one map, or one graph. To create a worksheet, you click on this icon in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. This creates a new worksheet tab at the bottom of the screen, which you can name whatever you want, and you'll see this in the demo. Worksheets, importantly, can be duplicated. So if you create a chart that you really like and want to create a similar chart with just a few differences, you can duplicate it and then make those alterations. Several worksheets can be dragged onto a dashboard. So if you want to have a bunch of side-by-side charts, you can drag them onto one dashboard and use common filters. You'll see this in the demo as well. But if you want to have a bunch of charts and you want all the charts to filter on a particular zip code area, for example, you can set up a filter that filters them all at the same time. Now let's talk about the types of data that you have to work with. So depending on the data set that you're using, you'll probably have some data fields which are dimensions and some which are measures. So those dimensions are those categorical data fields that we talked about a while ago. When you drag them into the view, so onto the rows or columns or filters, you'll see that in a moment, they appear as what Tableau calls blue pills. They're colored in blue. Measures are those numerical or continuous data fields we talked about, like dollar amounts. And those are shown in green in Tableau, green pills. Tableau also automatically creates some measures or dimensions for you whenever you connect to a data set. So one of them, and this one's really important, you'll see it in the demo, is a number of records field. It actually used to be called the Tableau number of records, which I thought was much more self-explanatory. It's really just counting the number of rows in your data set. Now what Tableau does is it names it after the data file, whatever your data file is named, or whatever the tab in your data file is named. Also, Tableau will create longitude and latitude data for you based on any geographic data fields you have in your data set. So example, if you have zip codes in your data set, it will automatically give you the latitude and longitude for each zip code area, which is really helpful. because it allows you to build maps with your data. There's also a field called measure names and a field called measure values that allow you to build certain types of views that involve multiple measures in Tableau. I'm not going to cover that in the demo, but just want to let you know that exists. Okay, so the columns shelf creates the columns of a table, or the x-axis, so the horizontal axis. The rows shelf creates the rows of a table, also called the y-axis or the vertical axis. You can drag any number of measures or dimensions onto these shelves. This will make more sense in a moment when you see it in action. When a measure or dimension is dragged onto the filters pane, you can filter the view by that variable. So you can also choose to show the filter and allow the viewer to control it for an interactive experience. So again, if you dragged, for example, zip code area onto filters and then showed that filter, your viewers will be able to zoom in on just certain zip code areas and see how the results differ for different zip code areas. When you drag measures and dimensions to the view, the data are displayed using marks, what we also called encoding. So that's transferring those words and numbers into some visual format. Tableau calls them marks. Marks can be displayed in many different ways, including lines, shapes, bars, maps, and so on. Tableau defaults to certain types of marks depending on the type of data you drag into the view, but you can change the marks to whatever you like. The type of mark you use and the mark properties are controlled by the marks card. That's what's being pointed at here. And we'll see this in action in a moment as well. Okay, finally, I just wanted to point out there's this show me button in the upper right-hand corner of the worksheet view that creates views based on the fields, the data fields that are already in the view, or any data fields that you've selected in that data pane on the left. So you can use a control button, for example, to select multiple measures and dimensions from your data pane that you want to use for a chart, and then click on the show me card, and Tableau will basically suggest some charts that you can use to show those data fields. And if you click on that chart, Tableau will automatically create the chart for you, and then you can alter it to better fit your needs. All right, so now let's get into it. I'm gonna get out of this view, and I'm going to share with you like a preview of the visualization that I'm going to start to create today. We don't have time to create the whole thing. And why isn't it getting big for me? Let's see. I'm sorry, Tableau is a little bit slow. It's okay, now we got it. There we go. We can do an entire view. Okay. So you can see, again, this is all about showing an organization's reach. So the data that we're looking at is from, I'm in Chicago, so I'm sorry I'm not showing Miami data, but it's from the organization called the Chicago Micro Lending Institute. You probably have something similar in Miami. CMI trains and develops micro lenders to expand small business financing in Chicago. The circles on the map show the locations, specifically the zip code area of small business owners who have received loans through the Chicago Microlending Institute. And let's see, the size of the circles shows the number of loans in that zip code area. I think I'm, okay, yeah, I had something selected. So those are all the loans that the CMI had made between 2012 and 2016. So where you see larger circles, that's where there have been more loans. Smaller circles show where there have been fewer loans. And then the bar chart on the right shows the number of loans in each type of industry. So if you scroll over the circles, you see what the zip code area is and the specific number of loans in that zip code area. It has this filter feature. It actually one chart filters the other. So if I want to see only the industries in which loans were made in 60618, I can click on that one. And then the chart on the right automatically filters, and I'm just looking at those 10 loans and what industries they're in. Click again to unfilter. Let's say I want to see on the map only where daycare loans were. I can click on the daycare bar, and then the map automatically filters to show me where those daycare loans were. So you can kind of see the possibilities of this kind of chart for showing your organization's reach. You can show where your programs are, where your clients are, where different types of clients are, or audiences are, that sort of thing, or fundraising information, like where are your donors. All right. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you, so we're gonna get part way to making this data dashboard. I do want to show you the data file I'm going to be using. So you can see it's a simple data file. I've opened it in Excel here. So we just have each row in this data file represents a single loan made by the Chicago Microlending Institute. And let's look at what kind of data we have. So for each loan, we have the loan date, we have the lender, then we have a bunch of data fields that get at the location of the loan, including the address, the zip. Chicago's divided into wards, so it gives the ward number. Then we have the industry related to the loan, and we actually have location and latitude, longitude. We're not going to be using that location data because, again, Tableau will use this zip code information to automatically create latitude and longitude for me. Okay, so I've oriented you to the data. Let's jump in to Tableau and start to create this chart. Okay, so here's that worksheet view that that I said you know where you are most of the time in Tableau. The first thing you're going to need to do is connect to your data. So I'm going to click on Connect to Data up here. And then I'm going to choose, actually, it's a text file or CSV file. So I'm going to choose text file. And Tableau is going to go a little slow for me. And then I'm going to just navigate to my data. Sorry about that. Here's my data file. So Tableau is now in the process of connecting to my data. And then what you see is that Tableau has basically kind of recreated my spreadsheet, but now it's within Tableau. So the first thing you want to do is just to look at the data before you start to visualize it. What Tableau has done is made a best guess at the type of data fields I have here. And if you can see these little tiny icons at the top of each column, it shows you what Tableau has guessed for that data field. So for loan, it has guessed that it is a date field because it's given me this little calendar icon, and indeed loan is a date field. It's uses the icon ABC for those categorical or sometimes called string variables or data fields. And it is correctly identified lender as a string or categorical data field. Same with a bunch of these. It's identified city as a geographic field because it has this little globe on it. Same with state and zip. It identified ward as a numerical field because it gives me this number sign. Ward, you can understand why it thinks it's a numerical field because it's a bunch of numbers. But ward are really just numbers being used as names. You can't add ward 28 to ward 47, for example. So I'm gonna change this, click on the icon and tell it it's actually a string or categorical data field. And then industry, of course, is a categorical field as well. So my data looks pretty good. So what we're going to do is click on sheet number 1, start building our first visualization, which is going to be that map. So I'm going to change the name from sheet number 1, sorry about that, to map. And then I am going to create my map. And it's amazing how easy it is to create a map in Tableau. I'm going to just take my zip code geographic field, and all I'm going to do is double click on it, and Tableau knows to create a map because it's a geographic field. So watch what happens. Double clicked on it. You can see Tableau has put longitude and latitude on the columns and rows shelf, and is automatically created a map for me. I don't know if you're familiar with the Chicago area, but this big white space on the side is Lake Michigan. And you can see Chicago borders Lake Michigan. And there's a blue mark. It's defaulted to be a circle mark for each zip code area in my data set. So I'm already partly there. It's also zoomed in on Chicago rather than showing me the whole country or the whole world, because it can see all my zip code areas are in this geographic area. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is resize these circles to show the number of loans in each zip code area. You remember I was talked about those fields that Tableau creates for you, and that number of records field, which is named for my data file, is right here. So what I'm going to do is, in order to change a characteristic of my mark, I always use this marks card, which is right here. And I'm going to just drag the number of records, which again is the number of rows in my data set. So each row represents one loan. I'm going to drag that and put it on size. And you can see that they now each mark or circle has resized to show the number of loans. I even have a size legend here in the upper right hand corner. So the really small circles show where there have been only one loan, larger circles show where there have been many loans. Okay, so I'm getting there. I'm already looking more like what I want here. Let's see. I'm gonna just change the look of this map. There are a lot of options in Tableau for changing the look of charts and maps. For maps in particular, I'm gonna go up to this map menu at the top here and choose map layers. And you can see there are different styles you can choose from here. I'm going to go ahead and choose that streets style, and you can see how that differs. You can see it just puts in a lot of information. If I don't want that much information, I can eliminate data layers. So I'm going to just show you how that works. So I'm eliminating the base, the streets. I'm going to just eliminate all of it just so you can see how that works. Okay, so now I just have my marks with none of those borders or labels. I also just wanted to point out that Tableau has some data layers built into it. This is similar to that map that Tim was showing from the Opportunity Atlas. Tableau just has some basic information such as population data. So like median age, if I chose that, it will automatically create a color-coded map for the median age. It's doing it by state, so that's not very helpful, but I could have it by zip code, and you can see, you know, where these loans are according to median age of the people in that zip code, which is probably not that informative. But there's other data layers that you might use here. I am going to just use, well, maybe I'll just use population. Again, it doesn't vary that much, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the different data layers that you can use here if they were meaningful to you. So I'm going to just zoom out here. Okay. I think that's all I want to do with data layers, or wanted to show you with data layers. So the next thing I want to do is change the map background So a lot of the ways to change the formatting are in the formatting menu up here. I'm going to choose shading, and I'm going to just choose a darker background here, a dark blue background. And then close out of this menu. Anytime you choose a menu from up here, the specific menu appears on the left, and close out of that. Now I would like to make those circles orange. So again, whenever I'm changing something about a mark, I go to the marks card and click on circle, make that orange, maybe change the border to a lighter orange. I can also, I'm going back there, reduce the opacity of the color so that overlapping marks are a little bit easier to see. So maybe I'll just do it like that. Okay, and I think this might be all. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with the map as it is. So I'm gonna just quickly show you how to do that bar chart. So I'm gonna go back down here and create a new worksheet. I'm gonna rename that worksheet bar chart. And just show you how to make a bar chart in Tableau. So I'm going to, again, as you may recall, we were showing the number of loans by industry. So I am going to drag industry onto rows here, and that will give me all my industries that are in the data set. And then I'm going to take that automatically generated field that shows you number of rows, and I'm going to put that on columns. And Tableau defaults to a bar chart. I could change it to a different kind of chart if I wanted to, but I actually do want a bar chart here. So now I have the number of loans that were in each industry. And I might want to directly label these bars rather than have the x-axis labels down here. So I'm going to just right click and uncheck show header to get rid of all that x-axis information. I also don't need this label for industry, so I'm going to just hide. I right clicked on it and choosing to hide field labels and rows. And I'm going to directly label each one of these bars to make it easier to read the chart. So again, I'm going to take that number of records field and put it on label. And now each one of my bar charts is labeled. And I'm going to put these rows in these bars in descending order to make it, again, easier to read. So I'm going to just click on this descending order icon up here at the top. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to just put both of these charts onto a dashboard so you can see how it looks. I won't do all the things I need to do to pretty it up because that would take more time than we have today, but it will give you a general sense. So I'm going to click down here at the lower left-hand corner on the icon for a dashboard and click on that dashboard. The first thing to do in creating a dashboard is to determine the size of the dashboard. Under size here, you have a number of options. There's this range option, which gives you a minimum and maximum width and height. You can also do a fixed option, which is great if you know what types of devices and what size screens your users are going to use. And you can see there's some default sizes built into Tableau here. And then there's also this automatic sizing option, which, as it says, the dashboard will resize to fit any screen it is displayed on. I do want to give you a little warning about that. Sometimes this resizing function can really mess up the formatting in your dashboard. So if you want to use this automatic sizing option, you should read more about it by just going to the Tableau website or Googling that issue before choosing automatic sizing. I'm going to just use automatic sizing for today, just to give you a sense. So you can see we have our two sheets, the map and the bar chart here. And when I scroll over them, I get a little thumbnail version of them. And when you bring a sheet onto a dashboard, you can either bring it on in a tiled way or a floating way. I'm going to bring the map on in a tiled way. That just means that it will take up, if it's the only worksheet on the dashboard, it will take up 100% of the dashboard. If there's already a worksheet on the dashboard, it will take up 50%. If there's 2 already on the dashboard, it will take up 33% and so on. So I'm gonna just pull on the map. It's gonna take up the whole size of the dashboard, as you can see. I don't want, it automatically gives me this size legend and color legend. I don't want those, so I'm gonna just click to delete that container. Tableau calls this, if you can see this gray outline around the map, that's a container on a dashboard. If I wanted to bring the bar chart in a tiled way, you can see I've tiled chosen here at the bottom. What happens, you can see, is that Tableau is at, before I let go of my mouse, I can put it on any place that's 50% of the entire dashboard. So I could drop it there and it will take up 50%. But I'm going to close this. I can also bring it in a floating way, and that allows me to place it exactly where I want to place it. So I'm going to choose the bar chart. I'm going to change this to floating down here. I'm going to just float my bar chart in here. Okay, there's a lot I would need to change. I want to change this white background, and I'm going to change, I would change the color of the bars. I'm not going to do any of that right now, but I just wanted to show you this filter feature that we can use where you can filter one chart with another. So you can see when I select the map, it's selected because there's this gray outline. I see this little filter icon. I can click on that. If it's white, that means it will filter the other charts on the dashboard. So I'm going to do the same for the bar chart here. I'm going to click on this filter feature. And then that's what allows me to click on one mark on the map and to show the related industries on the bar chart. Or similarly, just click on a industry to see where the zip codes are related to the loans in that industry. Okay. Again, there's a lot of cleaning up. I'd add a title and stuff, but we won't go into that today. The instructions I'm providing get you all the way to that final product. So it would be a great way of learning more about Tableau. But you can kind of see the potentials of Tableau for showing your organization's reach just with this sort of simple demographic type data. Okay. So how are we? We're still doing pretty well on time. So I'm gonna go back to my slides. Okay. At this point, are there any questions that I could answer about Tableau that anyone has?
So Amelia, there was one from Carla who says, are there more tutorials you would recommend for Tableau Public? What other tools would you recommend?
I have a slide, I'm pretty sure, coming up on that, but let me just answer it now, just in case. Oh no, actually it's coming up in like a moment. So I will answer your question in a moment. Any other questions? Okay, let's go on. All right, resources to continue your data viz journey. And so Carla, here you go. So if you want to learn more about visualizing data in Excel, there's a great YouTube series by Leela Garani that I would suggest on how to create charts in Excel. She has a lot of different videos, so you can learn how to create a lot of different charts. Similarly, for Google Sheets, if that's your weapon of choice, I would suggest the Google Sheets charts tutorial, again in YouTube, by Loves Data. And for Tableau, Tableau has its own free training videos on the Tableau website, which are great. And I've learned a lot of Tableau just by Googling on YouTube or just in Google in general. When you want to learn how to do something really specific in Tableau, but I would start with the Tableau website and sort of the introductory videos. I also wanted to point you to a great resource that Tableau provides for free called the Tableau Public Gallery. And that's where people who've chosen to share their dashboards and charts and stuff that they've created with Tableau Public. You can go and see what other people have created. It can be quite inspiring. And you can also search through for, charts on particular topics and stuff. They also feature some really good charts. Sometimes the visualizers will allow you to download what they created and open it up in Tableau Public yourself. And if you really want to learn some great techniques in Tableau, you can kind of reverse engineer those dashboards and see how they created them. Tableau is a very sophisticated tool. When I talk about tools for data visualizing, I always talk about it in terms of a continuum. So at one end of the continuum are programs like D3, and that's like what the New York Times uses to visualize data. No one whose job isn't full-time data visualization is ever going to take the time to learn D3, but it's one of the most sophisticated tools that are out there. You would need to know a lot of programming language to use it effectively. At the other end of the spectrum are sort of those built-in data visual tools that often come with databases. So those are the kind of tools where you don't need to know anything, right? Like it basically just spits out a chart for you. But there are very few, if any, tools within those applications for customizing your charts, maps, and graphs. Tableau kind of exists in the middle of that continuum. So you don't need to know programming language. It's a drag and drop tool, but you could also create some really sophisticated visualizations using Tableau. Tableau markets itself as sort of out of the box, start visualizing your data tomorrow. And I don't think that's quite accurate. I've yet to meet anyone who felt like Tableau was like an immediately accessible tool. It's still a pretty steep learning curve, but once you learn it, there's some really sophisticated things you can do with it. As I mentioned, I use Tableau with a lot of my clients, which are all nonprofits. And what I often do is we create a really sophisticated data dashboard. I create it for them based on their needs. And then I teach them just how to refresh the data on their own. And they don't need to learn any Tableau, really, just like the basic data refreshing. And then they have a great, really sophisticated data dashboard that they can embed in their website, for example. They don't need to spend any money because they're using Tableau Public, and it's just a short-term consultation with me. But you should know that Tableau also offers discounts for nonprofits, and it actually offers free licenses for smaller nonprofits. You can check out more information on the Tableau Foundation website about that. Okay, also want to tell you about my blog called 60-Second Data Tips. If you put your email in the chat, I'm happy to sign you up, but you can also go to my website, nonprofitbiz.com, and they're really just very short data tips. You'll receive one in your email each week, and it's kind of a quick, painless, and easy way to up your data game by just investing 1 minute a week. I also have all my past data tips on my website. If you want to know some great data viz gurus out there, here are some people I would suggest you follow and read. I already mentioned Edward Tufte, who's kind of the grandfather of data viz, modern data viz. A couple names on this list that you might want to particularly check out because they visualize the type of data that's going to be more familiar to you are Anne Emery. She often visualizes nonprofit and public sector data. She is an Excel guru. She takes Excel to a very high level and does mostly trainings that you sign up for online. There's also Stephanie Evergreen, who I also mentioned earlier, and John Schwabish of the Urban Institute. Andy Kirk and Steve Wexler are Tableau people. The other people on the list are just generally great data viz people that you can learn a lot from. Okay, so Tim, you tell me. I'm happy to cover one or more of these bonus topics, depending on whether you feel like we have enough time, and we can see what people are most interested in. If that
Sure,
works.
maybe we'll do one of those.
Okay. Okay, so let me talk. Tim is putting up the poll and you can vote, but I'll just give you a little blurb about each one. So PowerPoint makeover is just a few slides showing how to make a PowerPoint that people actually pay attention to. Number 2 is how to consume data, which is, I've talked a lot about how to be the visualizer yourself, but when you come across charts, maps, and graphs, and newspapers, and websites, and social media, how can you extract information from those really easily? That's what that bonus topic is about. And then the third topic is called What's Wrong with This Viz. That's a little game show where I present you with a visualization and you tell me what's wrong with it based on what you learned today. So go ahead and choose your favorite topic and I'll cover that topic.
Amelia, it's not even close. Everybody's voting for PowerPoint makeover.
That tends to be the most popular one. Okay, cool. Let's do it. All right. So data visualizations like charts, maps, and graphs often make their debut in PowerPoint presentations, or I'm just using PowerPoint as a stand-in for any kind of slideshow presentation. And we already know that PowerPoints are a problem, right? We've napped through many of them in our careers, and we even know when we're on the creating end that they shouldn't be text heavy, but we don't know what else to do besides typing in a few bullet points and pasting in some bad clip art. So there's a lot of advice out there about how to make better presentations, but I've whittled it down to just 3 rules that if you follow them, I think they'll dramatically improve your presentations. Okay, so my first rule is that slides are for seeing. So think about the last time you saw a subtitled movie. Did you miss a lot of the action while reading? Research shows we are good at simultaneously processing pictures and spoken words. So we're good at looking at pictures and listening to words. But our brains go on overdrive when processing pictures plus written text, like you do during a subtitled movie. And our brains can completely shut down when processing written text plus spoken words, which is what we ask audiences to do during a lot of PowerPoint presentations. We're listening to a presenter say one thing and at the same time trying to read bullet points that say something similar, but not exactly the same. So let's test this out. So here's sort of my before slide. I'll show you the after slide in a bit. As you can see, there's lots of text and bullet points and one really bad, rather small visualization in the lower corner. Now look at the slide and listen to me talk a bit. I'm gonna just pretend that I'm presenting this slide. Okay. The respondents to the survey were mostly female, residing in the suburbs, but a large minority lived in urban areas. The large majority were reported to be white, and as you can see, although we had a range of ages, most were in the 40 to 49 bracket, which differs from past surveys, which had more respondents in the 20 to 29 bracket. Okay, so did you hear everything I said, or did you absorb all the information on the slide? Probably not. You probably experienced a bit of brain cacophony. It's a term I use to describe that feeling of being overwhelmed and confused by too much information crowding the verbal brain channels all at once. So here's the after slide. It's just a brief takeaway and a bold image that reflects the takeaway. There's no charts at all. It would be much easier to listen to me talk while looking at this, and it bolsters what I'm saying rather than competes with it. Okay, rule number 2 is portion control. So the hard truth is that our audience members are going to walk away from our presentations retaining just a few ideas, whether we like it or not. If we shower them with lots of ideas, we don't control which ones they retain. So choose just a few and weed out the rest. Then feature only one idea per slide and go easy on the charts, maps, and graphs. They're more difficult to process than just images like photos. So give your viewers a cognitive break between charts. And the last rule is to obey visual hierarchy. So visual hierarchy is a term used in graphic design, and it means the arrangement or presentation of visual elements in a way that implies importance. So it tells you basically, what should I look at first? What should I look at second? What should I look at third? So simplify your slides with one compelling image or one chart, map, or graph, which itself has been stripped down to sort of the bare minimum of what's necessary. Make sure there's plenty of empty space around the image to give it prominence, and then enlarge only the most important text while reducing the size of the rest. Similarly, use color sparingly to draw attention to the most important elements of the slide, what you want people to pay attention to first, and then kind of mute out the rest. Oops, and then that's my second topic. So that's my last slide on PowerPoint presentations. So should I just wrap it up here, Tim?
Yeah, that sounds great, Amelia.
Okay. So again, it's been great being with you. I wish I were actually in Miami. Here's my contact information. Happy to chat. You can go to my website and set up a free consultation with me if you want. And also free to chat over email. So hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amelia. It's great to have you with us again today, and it's a wonderful presentation. And I think you had so many great examples in there that kind of intersect with all the groups that we have here working on, various issues in social justice. So really appreciate your time. I know you have a lengthy presentation, but it doesn't feel like it because everybody's just taking it in, and yeah, it's fantastic. So thanks again for that. I would like to remind everybody next week we've got focus on media and social media for social justice, including presentations by Ashley Reed, formerly of Hootsuite. We'll be talking social media for activists. Sanjeev Chatterjee from the University of Miami talking about the power of storytelling in media. We'll also be sending around all the presentations you saw today. So Dr. Escobar and the Measures for Justice presentation, and of course, Amelia's presentation that she just gave here today, and the kind of the walkthrough of Tableau Public. But really appreciate all the great presentations today. For next week as well, we'll be talking about small grants. So PeaceTech Lab has grants, not very big ones, up to $2,000 that we can provide, very light application process as well. Thanks to Kohm as well for reaching out to everybody and bringing them into this. And thank you all for joining us. When you log off, there's going to be just a short survey. If you could fill it out, we'd really appreciate your feedback. And I hope everybody has a great weekend and enjoys Juneteenth. Take care.